All right.
I'm not.
So who did not read the chapter? Did you read the chapter, Ashley?
Yeah, I just read it.
You read.
Yeah.
You're a fast reader. It take me longer than 15 minutes to read that chapter. Yeah, it's not that hard. I mean, the reading is pretty easy, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, it's written in pretty simple language, so that's good. So you used to be able to participate in the discussion. And so, well, let's jump in. I don't want to take up too much time. I want to get a lot of stuff done today, but what is faith? So, is Christianity rational? How do I know that Christianity is true? Right? How can I have confidence that what I believe is real? So I think that's a fundamental issue that everyone's got to deal with on some level sooner or later. I like the little kid. What is faith? Faith is believing what you know is not true. But and I'm sure if you listen to your friends, you kind of get that feeling. That's kind of how people feel about faith when you start talking about faith. Oh yeah, that's just self-deception. That's just pie in the sky. That's kind of, you know, there's nothing to it. Do you guys get that feeling when you go outside the church and talk to people? When you have this idea of faith is that. So one of the first things you have to do when you're sharing the gospel is I think you have to address that issue head on and explain the relationship between faith and reality and truth. And that faith is probably not what they think it is. So you might have to do some dialoguing on faith. So is faith less reliable than fact or experience? What do you guys think? That was one of the lines in the book. People think, faith, that's. You guys agree with that? I mean, do you guys struggle with that? Do you think, okay, I have my scientific fact here. I have my personal experience here, and then I have what I believe maybe a little further over here. Is that kind of how your brain works? What do you
I
say?
think faith, for me, I think faith is a combination of facts and experience. Because if people have personal experiences of different things in life. Some people might have trauma, some people might have some good things that happen to them. And so I think like those experiences kind of drive a person to believe in something.
Mhm.
Like, um, some people uh, have used religion as a way to kind of um, make sure that what they believe in uh, is personified by what they actually have experienced in life.
Okay,
Because
so
if
you
you're
have personal experience in there. That's part of faith. Okay. How about you, Phil? Where would you, in your own personal experience, how do you rate faith with your scientific fact, logical deductions?
I think I was thinking similarly to Inky. I feel like faith is for me comprised of it gets into it towards the end of the chapter, but between objective and subjective,
Mhm.
uh, knowing that there is facts to support that, but then also our own personal experiences that may not apply to others, but we know that to us personally, it's something that we can rely and depend upon. So I think it's a mix, but also just, I mean, being able to, I mean, you're given the facts, you're given the experiences. Now, do you choose to actually believe, and do you actually, or, because I think there was a part in this chapter too where they mentioned, do you I mean, there's a lot of smart people. Why doesn't everyone believe in it? It's because they choose not to believe in it. And that's, I think, where that faith component comes in. Because once you believe and put your faith in Christianity, then it's not like you continue to put yourself on the pedestal and live the life the way that you would want to on a worldly basis. So I wouldn't say faith is less reliable than fact or experience, but definitely works in tandem with both of them.
Okay. Right. And in the last chapter is Christian experience viable? So
Mhm.
we're going to come, kind of full circle, and you say, well, I experience God. Well, is that a real argument? Right? Can we use that? Is that convincing in any way? In Hebrews 11:1, it says, faith is confidence in what we hope for, and assurance in what we don't see. So those are pretty strong words. Faith is not, just kind of hoping something's true, kind of wishing, right? So faith has some kind of very strong conviction that this is definitely true. It's real, and I'm going to base my life upon it. If you look at the rest of chapter 11 of Hebrews, you see people says because they had faith, Moses gave up being the king of Egypt, and instead was mistreated with the people of God. By faith, Abraham, even though he was 100 years old, was able to have a child. By faith, David, and by faith, all these people committed themselves to things that they couldn't see, knowing that they were real, and they lived their life on the basis of this conviction. And so it's not like faith is just wishful thinking, self-delusion, self-deception, right? Something is definitely going on here. There's a reality that faith is based on. We're going to pick up on that a little bit. And so a lot of, we don't have to kiss our brains goodbye. That we can be Christians and we can be rational at the same time. So, Ashley, what are some of the forces that vie for people's attention nowadays? When you start sharing the gospel and you start talking to them about, God and Christ and sin and things like that, what are some of the things that you've experienced that are pulling them away from that?
I think a big one nowadays is kind of like a lot of the focus is on how you should be like taking care of yourself and how good the world makes you feel, like that motto, like take like self-care, or like take care of yourself, put yourself first, but that doesn't really go hand in hand with like the Christian, um I don't
So
know,
people
kind
are
of.
wrapped up in themselves,
Yeah,
taking care of themselves. So when you start sharing the gospel, maybe it doesn't really click with them,
yeah,
fit into their, doesn't fit into their mindset.
yeah.
Hey, how does it, I mean, I'm busy doing this. Why would I bother looking at that? How about you, Inky? What are some of the things that you see pulling people away from talking about faith and God and things like that?
Like you actually said, the self, right? What we want to do uh, in life and the things that we're interested in. And also our like perception, like in terms of like watching the news or media, social media influences,
Okay.
and also the way that other people, like friends and family, how the relationships between those individuals to yourself are. And a lot of people um, that who believe in God, um, they sometimes have this feeling that um, there are external forces that um, like they believe in, they have their own belief system and
Okay.
like how to interpret the Bible. And so
When you start
oftentimes
bringing, when you start bringing the Bible to them, they've already have this matrix or this
right.
matrix, so they're filtering it through. Okay. Phil, let me ask you a question. How well thought out do you think people worldviews are? I mean, where are they getting their worldview from? Where are they getting their idea of what's true, what's real, and how coherent do you think those worldviews are and rational from your perspective?
Is this just in general or respect to like,
Could be someone in person that you know someone personally from work, or just things that you've seen in general.
um, I feel like a lot of part of that worldview might be shaped when they're growing up, maybe
Mhm.
depending on their family backgrounds. I think friends are also influenced too. Sometimes they bring you to this temple or this church or other depending on where they're from, and they just want to at the end of the day maybe just be friends or go as friends. Um, I feel like also there's a lot of judgment calls, but I think in terms of the actual facts and doing the research, I it's kind of hard for me to believe the average person's worldview is shaped off of that, in my opinion. Um, just because I think they honor a lot of the subjective stuff comes out first, I feel like, from my experience. Like people share about I don't know, their personal experiences, testimonies, why they believe what they believe, um but then it's kind of wishy-washy whether people actually start talking about the Bible, and just for like an average person, I feel like a lot of it's shaped just from personal experiences growing up.
Right. I think you said even social media and things like that. Actually, how do you sense that the people you talk to have a well thought out rationale for what they believe, for what they think is real and true?
Well, for what they believe. I don't. That's a hard question. I feel like no, because I feel like a lot of the world is shaped around like wanting like instant gratification, and like the world, like we want like instant results. And so
Mhm.
I think a lot of the way that we kind of act or make decisions is based on like what decision, if I make this decision, like is it going to bring the result that I want sooner or faster kind of thing. And so a lot of our kind of like focus is very narrow and like short term.
Okay, and they're probably more focused on the immediate, right? What gets me a result, like you said, what gets me the results that I want right away, or quickly. Right. So the point I'm making, I think the majority of the people that you're going to be sharing the gospel with haven't thought through philosophically, their position. Right. And sometimes as Christians, we're afraid. Oh my gosh, they're going to think I'm a weirdo. They're going to think I'm crazy. They're going to think I'm out in left field. They're going to come out with all these, but really, if you just do a little bit of thinking on your own and say, why do I believe what I believe? And you come up with a rational explanation for why you believe God exists, why you believe Jesus is the Son of God, why you believe Christ died on the cross. And you come and say, look, I believe this is true, and here's why. I think like 90% of the people are going to go there, they're going to be blown away. Right? Because they just think that Christians are just mindless people and they just kind of believe whatever the pastor tells them, whatever their religion tells them, and they're just looking for a crutch, emotional crutch to get them through. But if you can start showing them that you have a well thought out worldview and you've put these things together in a way that makes sense, and there's a reason why you believe that, I think you are in a better position and a higher position, and you don't have to be afraid. Right. Now you're gonna maybe run into professors, you're gonna run into people who've taken philosophy classes or done literature, or they've done stuff like that. Yeah, and then they might be able to run circles around you with their worldview or their understanding of worldview. But I would say most of the people you're going to encounter are not going to even know what faith is and what reason is. They're not going to know. They're just going to think, oh, you're weird. But then you start talking to them, they say, oh, wait a minute, that makes sense. So I just want to give you guys some confidence that as we go through this course, that if you really start thinking through these issues, you can have a lot of assurance, you can have a lot of confidence. Look at on page 16 and 17, he talks about what is faith. And he gives 3 comments. He makes 3 statements about faith. Did you guys pick up on that, Inky? Well, what's the first thing?
We all use faith every day.
We all use faith every day. What do you think about that? Is that how is that true? What are some of the ways that you use faith today, apart from the Bible, apart from being a Christian, just in your normal day life?
Well, when I wake up, I say, it's always a good feeling that I'm still alive. So for
So
me,
you have faith that you're alive.
right, that I could be walking and doing the things that I need to do. And also like faith in the work that I do. It's always a good thing to know that what you're doing is something that you want to do and you're passionate about something.
Okay.
And then for me, because I go to the doctor's office a lot, I have a lot of faith in my doctors to make sure that what they're prescribing me for medication and all this is actually going to benefit me and not cause me harm.
Good. Yeah. So you're exercising faith every day, even that they're going to pay you for the job work that you do. How about you, Phil? Give me a couple of examples of how you use faith every day, or someone uses faith every day.
I don't know why this one comes up, like setting an alarm to wake up in the morning. There's times where, yeah, and there's times where maybe it actually doesn't ring, but I do definitely rely on my alarm to wake me up early in the morning. And then once I wake up, it's my decision whether to stay awake or go back to sleep. But I think that faith component, just trusting and something that for me is I can kind of depend upon to keep me up in the morning or start my morning off.
Okay, there you go. So there you see, that's faith.
Yeah.
Faith is simply putting your trust in something or someone.
Yep.
Right? It's not mystical. It's not some weird stuff. It's not merely an opinion. It's something you need to function every single day. If you had to go through a process of proving that your alarm clock is going to go off every time you used it, you wouldn't have time to do anything else. Yeah. If you had to validate your doctor every time that you went there, I mean, that would take, half your day.
Oh, yeah.
What's the second thing, Ashley? What's the second point he makes?
Faith is only as valid as the object in which it is placed.
Is that true? And why?
Well, if we go back to like the doctor example, like how would we trust the medical profession if like they weren't fully equipped and trained and skilled in what they were doing?
Just so you know that half of the doctors out there graduate in the bottom half of their class. Just saying. Just saying. Maybe you shouldn't place your faith in all of them, right? I've had some bad experiences with doctors. I probably shouldn't have put my faith in them. So maybe that doctor wasn't worthy of my trust. And another doctor would have been more worthy of my trust. Okay. Any other examples you can think of where faith is only as good as the object that is placed in?
I rely on my car to take me to like my work and school, and it needs to be highly functioning so that I don't get into an accident every day. So,
Right. Yeah.
I put like a lot of trust into my vehicle.
I'm losing faith in my car. It's 20 years old. My wife I took my wife's car to the shop today, and then she drove my car to go swimming. I said, "Don't do it! Don't take my car. You're gonna die."
Well, my car is fairly new, which is why I have a greater amount of trust. Yeah.
Right. So that's another really important point you need to bring out. That faith is merely trust, but what really matters is, what am I putting my trust in? And so we need to evaluate the object of that faith to make sure that it is worthy of that kind of trust. And so that brings us to the third point, Inky, which is
Testing the reliability of objects of faith is rational and certainly advisable.
it's the sensible thing to do. Right? Check out your doctors, check out your car, check out your iPhone. So as a Christian, is it rational and advisable to test out our object of faith, which would be Christ and God and the Bible? Yeah. And so we want to make sure that the object of our faith is worthy of our trust. And there's many ways that we can do that. But that's going to be one of the things in the course. So if you can tell people, look, if faith is merely trusting, and what's important is what you're putting that trust in, and then you should examine it. And you can chat, and they're going to say, oh, you believe in God? What are you, a lunatic? I said, well, you don't believe in God? What are you basing that on? You're putting your faith in the belief that God does not exist. Why do you believe that? On what basis? How valid is that belief? How valid is that assumption? Right? You're saying I'm crazy for believing in God. I'm saying you're crazy for not believing in God. So let's talk about that, right? So it's not faith that's crazy. It's what do you put in your faith in? And that gives us something more objective than to talk about, right, Phil? That would be the more objective aspect of it. What are we putting our faith in? So I thought that was really good. What about prior thinking? We talked a little bit about that, but I guess, Phil, how does your prior thinking affect your view of Christianity? How does someone's prior thinking affect their view of Christianity? You come to share the gospel with them.
Yeah, I think it can show how much the person already knows about Christianity. Especially like I think based off of when you like bring up the gospel and they start to ask questions, I think even the questions alone, you can kind of already get a sense of like, I don't know, whether they've read the Bible or not, or maybe there's things they've, back to like Inky's point, like they've had misconstrued like beliefs of the Christian faith. So I think it kind of shows based on growing up, what they've been taught from various people, like what their current view and belief is. And there may be some things that are like inaccurate or accurate, but I think it just shows how much they already know.
Right. So he says one's prior thinking is a key factor. So that's definitely something you want to bring into the conversation. You want to find out, do they have bad experience with Christianity? Are they antagonistic toward Christianity? Are they totally ignorant of Christianity? Right. Or are they deeply involved in another religion or another worldview? And you want to know that up front, because that's going to affect the way that they interact with you and understand you and misunderstand you. So I thought that was really important, that you need to examine your prior thinking, because your presuppositions really determine how you understand. Because you're always filtering everything into your paradigm. And we talked about paradigms when we looked at the 7 habits. And so you can be talking to them about Jesus, God, faith, creation, whatever, and they're taking that round peg and they're trying to cram that into their square hole. And they're like, this isn't fit. Or maybe they get them all stuck in there and they're looking at it like, that looks weird. Yeah, because you're putting them in the wrong place. Your grid is all wrong. Your worldview is all wrong. And they need to have a paradigm shift. And once they have that paradigm shift, then the pieces fall into place. So keep that in mind. Is a lot of what you have to do is you have to help them get to that point where they get the paradigm shift. Because their prior thinking is really inhibiting their ability to even understand what you're saying. or it could be an emotional blockage. Right? Maybe they had a priest who was abusive, or maybe they were in a church that was abusive, or they had parents who were religious but were, lunatics or just weird or mistreated them or something like that. And like, man, religion, anyone who believes in that stuff is bad. Or maybe they got indoctrinated in college or something like that. So really pay attention to their prior knowledge. Also, he talks about the emotional quotient. He talks about erroneous or obnoxious examples of practicing Christians who have turned us off. I guess I talked a little bit about that. Have you ever seen any of that, Ashley? Makes it hard to share the gospel, right?
Yeah.
So how do you deal with that? How do you deal with that issue?
Kind of hard because I remember one example when I was on campus, like there would be like these really vocal Christians. They would have like these pickets, and then they would be like, believe in Jesus or you'll go to hell. And they're like very like blatant about the truth, but that's not gonna be as receptive to like college students.
Mm-hmm.
So I think if I were to handle that situation, I mean, I would be more like cautious, and I would kind of be hesitant to actually share because they already have this like preconceived notion about the religion and maybe about me, like, oh, this person's also going to do the same. They're going to shove the same, faith down or religion down my throat kind of idea. So I don't know exactly how I would approach that.
Inky, can you think of any examples of philosophers or intellectuals who are obnoxious?
Well, I mean, you see those people on TV, like those ultra conservatives out there, or even like some of the, I would say like there are a lot of them currently on TV who are saying to people, you need to go to church, you need to believe in God or something bad's going to happen to you.
Let's take it out. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to take it away from Christianity now. And the point I'm trying to make is, hey, there's Christians out there who are obnoxious, but there's doctors out there who are obnoxious.
Yeah.
Right? There are teachers out there who are obnoxious. There's accountants and
Sure.
lawyers that are obnoxious. Right? And so you can say, yeah, I mean, I'm sure you've run into some Christians who are obnoxious, right? I'm sure you've had some salespeople who have been obnoxious, right?
Marketers,
right? Are all salespeople bad?
No.
They're just obnoxious. Are all teachers bad? No, they're right. And so you can say, yeah, yes, I'm sure maybe you've had some of those experiences where there have been obnoxious Christians, but that's just part of life. People are just obnoxious, whether they're Christians or salespeople or teachers or politicians, whatever, right? There's nice politicians and then there's Trump, right? I mean, you have the whole spectrum, right? So you can't just say, well, all politicians are bad because Donald Trump is an idiot, right? Or something like that. You can't do that because, and so you can help them through that issue, I think, if they've had those bad experiences, right? And so, you can even diffuse that even before it happens. If you kind of sense, you kind of get a feeling that they're kind of cringing, you can kind of see it, say, I bet you've probably seen it. You can bring it up yourself. Right. And so a good salesman will do that. Right. Hey, our product costs twice as much as everyone else's. Right. You might as well bring it out front, right? You must say, you're probably thinking, God, this guy's product is, my product is twice as expensive as everyone else. Why would I buy that? I can go get a cheaper one somewhere else. But let me tell you what, right? And now he's going to turn that into a positive, not a negative. Or he's going to say, yeah, but that's not as a big of deal as you think it is. Let me tell you why. Right. And so, yeah, there's obnoxious Christians out there. There's people out there who have said dumb things and been whatever. But look at Jesus Christ. Right. Let's take a look at who he is. Right. And that can help diffuse some of that emotional resistance. So being aware of that can help you avoid that problem up front. Also, if they come from Hinduism or they're Muslim or something like that, realize you're gonna have a lot of work to do up front in helping them to even understand who Jesus is. Missionaries, I know that in the last 100 years, they changed their approach when they go into new cultures that have never been exposed to Christianity, Western culture, is they start with the book of Genesis, and they start with the story of Genesis all the way. And by the time they get to the Gospels, right, and Jesus is being nailed on the cross, they get it, right? If you just start with Jesus being nailed on the cross, they're like, well, that's weird. They're nailing some guy to this tree. Oh, that's a horrible thing, right? But if you take them through the whole Bible, say, oh my gosh, that's the creator, that's the seed, he's a sacrifice, and they start putting all that together, boom, then it makes sense. But if you just start saying, hey, God loves you, has a wonderful plan for your life, Christ died for your sins. I mean, I'd say 75% of people out there, you say that, they're gonna be like, what planet are you from? What is that? I don't know. What are you talking about? Right. And it's not because they hate God or hate Christianity. They just have no framework even to understand those concepts. So keep that in mind, that prior knowledge is very, very important, how they're coming to you. And of course, then we have ethical humanism, pluralism. Do you know what pluralism is, Phil?
Is that just like believing everything is right? Like,
Yeah, all roads lead to God. All religions are basically the same.
yeah, like everyone is right in a sense.
Everyone's right. Can we all coexist? You ever see that the coexist bumper sticker?
Yep.
Yeah. Hey, we're all one big happy family. Yeah, except we just don't believe the same things about God, Jesus, sin, hell, death, forgiveness, redemption. Other than that, we're all in agreement, except about all the major important things that determine our eternal destiny. So they're not all the same, right? But in a pluralistic society where tolerance is the premier virtue, if you say, I am the way, the truth, and the life, no one comes to the Father but through me, you have resistance right there. You're labeled intolerant, you're labeled racist, it's going to be hate speech, right? There's going to be a lot of resistance to that. And so you might have to, back up a little bit and talk about pluralism, right? Does it make sense that everyone is right? Can everyone be right? Right? Can God be one God, monotheism as in Christianity, and at the same time be 300 million gods as in Hinduism? And then merely a animating force as in animism. How can those all be the same? How can those all be reconciled? I don't think so, right? So there has to be some way that we can begin to evaluate which way is the best way to go, right? If you said all roads lead to Chicago, right? Actually, when you go to school, do you just go and drive anyway? Are there certain roads you have to get on?
Mhm.
Yeah. You start going east, you're in trouble, right? Yeah. So there's only so many things that can be right. You can't have everything being right. That doesn't make any logical sense. And so you might have to back up and deal with that issue. So all religions are equally valid. We'll talk about that later on. Contradictions between religious systems are fully acceptable. So in other words, it can be night and it can be day at the same time. It can be black and it can be white at the same time. That's pretty hard to accept. The light can be on and off at the same time. Well, now with subatomic physics, maybe that's true. But an absolute truth does not exist. So that's going to be something that we talked about in our culture. When you start talking about absolutes, that this is true, this is the only thing that's true, right? You're going to get a lot of blowback. You're going to get a lot of resistance for that. So we have to say, well, why do you believe that there is absolute truth, Phil? Right? Actually, you have to say, why do you believe that Jesus Christ is the only way? You're going to have to be able to talk about that. You just can't assert it, right? And say, well, I guess you're an idiot because you don't believe that, and not because I do and you don't, right? You have to be able to say, hey, I understand that we live in a culture, we want to be tolerant of everyone, and I want to accept everyone too, but I also want to make sure I'm going in the right direction. So I'm not trying to be intolerant of other people. I personally just want to know what is real, what is true, because my eternal destiny depends on that. And so I personally am going to evaluate all the different options and choose which one I think is the best. And so we'll talk more about that. But that's a rational position, right? Didn't we talk about faith as putting your trust in something? Faith is only good as the object, and therefore it's sensible to evaluate that object, right? And Hinduism said, hey, the way to God is through this way. Nirvana is going to get there. Or if you're going to be Buddhist, you're going to just get rid of all your passions and desires. You're going to be Islam, you're going to focus on living this righteous life of submission to God. If you're going to be, Taoism, right? Well, I want to know which one of those ways is right. I don't want to just pick one and hope, right? Then you're worse. If you're just picking one and hoping, you're crazier than I am for evaluating the object of my faith to make sure that I'm putting my faith in something that is worthy of my trust and confidence. So I think you have to turn the tables on them. You have to be able to talk about the fact that there must be some truth out there, and I want to know what it is. I'm looking for it, and I want to put my faith in what I believe to be true. So Christianity, can it be tested objectively? What do you think, Inky? Are we stuck with merely subjective feelings and experiences, or are there any objective tests that we can look at?
There is. So he mentions about the garden and the gardener,
The
Where-
garden and the gardener.
where one guy says, there has to be a gardener here who takes care of these flowers.
Right.
And then the other guy says, no, there's no gardener here. What are you talking about? And so they kind of set up the tent and they kind of watch and see what happens. But there's no gardener. There's no physical gardener.
Uh-huh. So that's a debate that's going on between, Christian theists and atheists, right? So well-trained atheists will say, well, we don't see the gardener, he doesn't do it, therefore the gardener doesn't exist, right? But if I hold up my iPhone, pretty cool, right? If you're walking along on the beach, let's say 50 years ago, even 50 years ago, you're walking along the beach and somehow this got sent back in time and you pick this up, what would you think? What would you think, Phil? Just happened by chance? You turn it on. Oh my gosh, look at that.
Yeah, I'm like, what is this?
But man, I can make a phone call with this. I can take a picture with this. I can watch some videos on this. This is, I would have gone nuts. If I was a kid, I would have been living like this. Whoa, I can't imagine kids today with iPhones. How do they get anything done? I would be 24/7 be looking at this thing, right? And so you can say, look at this iPhone. Did this happen by chance? I don't see anybody. I didn't see the manufacturer. I've never seen the factory. I've never seen the people who designed it, but I believe that they exist. Isn't that crazy? What am I, stupid? What am I, weird? I believe that someone designed this iPhone and some genius called Steve Jobs came up with the idea. And then you got other people to design it. Then you got other people to, make it. And then other people to sell it, market it and sell it. And now it's in my hands. I believe all those people exist, though I've never met them personally. I've never seen them. I've only heard about them. I've read stories about these people. I've heard all these legends about these people sitting in these cubicles and they come up with these cool ideas and make these little programs and design this glass and all this kind of stuff and design all these manufacturing processes. I believe that this thing was created. I must be insane. Right? And so look at the world. Hello? Right? You can deny that there's a gardener, but if there is no gardener, there will be no garden.
Amen.
If there is no manufacturer, there will be no iPhone. If there's no Apple computer, there's no iPhone. It's just not going to happen by chance. So we'll talk about that more, but you can have confidence that the creation points to the creator, even though you've never seen him, even though he doesn't show up at your door, say, good morning, I'm the creator. Thought I'd introduce myself to you today, right? You just have to look at his creation and go, wow, that's pretty incredible. I just saw today, they discovered a bubble of galaxies 10 billion light years in across, which is, I think, like 10 times bigger than the Milky Way galaxy. This bubble of galaxies, and it's probably your residue from the Big Bang, all that kind of stuff. Pretty cool stuff, right? That's incredible. I mean, that's huge. How big does God have to be to do that? I can't do that. I don't know anybody could do that, right? And so I think the intelligent design and the argument from design is, I think, irrefutable. And anyone who says it's there is no gardener is not being intellectually honest. You look at DNA. You studied DNA a little bit, right, Ashley? How much information is in a strand of DNA?
A lot.
Wasn't that one of your questions on your exam today?
A lot.
A lot. Yeah, I mean, it's like what? More than the 26 volumes of the Encyclopedia Britannica on one little microscopic strand of DNA. And that DNA programs and is able to create a human being, a dog, a cat, a tree. That's incredible. That's mind-boggling. That you can't even see it, yet it can create, right? Take all the stuff from the environment and make proteins and make lipids and make all that kind of stuff and turn it into a living, functioning, breathing entity. That's mind-boggling. Can you do that, Ashley? Nah, not. Maybe next week after your next rotation, you'll be able to do that. Yeah, so don't be afraid of the argument from design. Also, you can talk about miracles, especially the resurrection. And that's one of the things we'll talk about. The fact that God breaks into history through his son and does miracles to prove who he is and to verify his message. And then he rises from the dead. And that's going to be a verifiable historical event. And that lends credibility to the gospel. Right? So you can look at creation, you can look at the resurrection, you can look at your conscience. Inky, has anyone ever done anything wrong to you?
Yeah.
What's the first words out of your mouth? That's not
fair, or
That's
that's
not
not
fair.
right.
That's not right. That's not fair. Where in the world did you get that idea, Inky?
I think it's a learned
It's learned from what? Who taught it to you?
Life experience, school.
Life experience told you things aren't fair?
Well, life in general is not fair. I think I learned that in maybe kindergarten, when Santa Claus didn't give me the toy that I wanted. That's where I kind of learned life is not fair.
I can understand Inky saying life is painful, life is disappointing, life hurts, life doesn't give me everything I want, but life's not fair. That's a moral judgment. Where does morality come from? If all there is in this universe is just matter, where does morality come from? Why do you instinctively know something's right and wrong? You have a conscience, and Paul talks about that in Romans chapter 2. Every single person has a conscience, and it convicts them or it applauds them. So when you do something bad, you go, oh man, that was wrong. Or someone does something bad to you, like, oh, I didn't like that. That's unfair. And so you have that conscience inside of you. Where did that come from? If you don't believe in God, it's really, really hard to explain where the conscience came from. So you have the moral argument for God. We'll talk about that as well. And then finally, you have prophecy. Hundreds of prophecies about Christ came true. God predicted things in the Old Testament that happened, came a year later, 20 years later, 100 years later, 200 years later. And so one of the things, the reason why there's so much prophecy in the Bible was to validate the message. Because only God knows the future. And God can say, hey, look, this is what's going to happen. Lo and behold, it happens. Then God says it again, another thing, another thing, another thing. And you start seeing this pattern is God is making all of these predictions and they're all coming true. So that's another proof for Christianity. We'll talk more about that. So there are objective things that we can point to. There's problems with every one of those, right? There's problem with the gardener, right? There's problems with the conscience. There's problems with miracles, and there's problems with prophecy. But when you start sharing those, people say, wait a minute. There's a reason why I believe, right? I'm not just believing because my parents told me or because I had this weird experience, had a dream one night, and I guess I'll believe that. But I started looking at these ideas and I was looking for the truth. I'm looking for that. And I found out that these things can be validated. Therefore, I think they are worthy objects in which I should place my trust. Right now, that's not the whole story, but that definitely is an important part of sharing the gospel, is that there is a rational body of truth. So he talks about this rational body of truth, Phil, and he talks about the whole person being involved. What does he mean by that? In order for a person to become a Christian, in order for a person to be saved, their whole being has to be engaged. What does he mean by that?
The whole being includes the heart, the mind, and the emotions and the will.
Okay. Why is that true? Can I just give people truth? Just dump a bunch of facts on them? Will they become a Christian?
No, like you need all of these because it's kind of like all of them is what kind of initiates that faith. Like you can't really have the mind but you don't have the heart behind it in terms of like proclaiming your faith to other people. And I think people like non-believers will see it if you're missing one of these attributes too. And I think it's important for the person to be confident in just what, and it's also kind of commanded to by God, by Jesus, to love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, will, and just being able to essentially use the whole person.
Mhm.
So it's some of them are kind of interdependent too. and can affect like how you converse with other people.
Okay, actually, he talks about defending and confirming the gospel from Philippians 1:7. What does that imply? If Paul is defending and confirming the gospel to the Philippians, what does that imply, according to the book?
That there is not like, it's not merely like just empty words that we're speaking, or like an empty religion that we're believing in, but there are facts and like truths to back up
Right?
what
So it's
we
not
do.
simply an emotional experience.
Yeah.
I'm saying it's not. I'm not saying that emotion isn't a part, but definitely if you're trying to persuade someone, that means there's a rational body of truth here that I'm pointing to and explaining it. Right. So the mind has to be engaged, but so does the heart, right? The heart has to be engaged. There has to be a desire, there has to be a love for that. But actually, what he talks about the will being the most important, and why is that?
I guess like you can like you can learn about anything like to its maximum potential, but then like if you don't like accept, like if you don't like believe in that truth, then it's kind of like meaningless. I don't know.
Well, it's a commitment, though.
Mm.
Right? It's not just mental assent to facts, but it's a commitment to a person, and it's a commitment to this life that's being presented. And so if you only present facts and you persuade them intellectually, I don't think you've done the job. They have to submit to Christ. They have to commit themselves to him and say, yes, I surrender to Christ. I trust in him to forgive my sins. I confess my sins, right? There has to be a volitional response to the truth and to the affections that have been moved. You have to submit emotion. And that's where most people struggle, because they know it's true and they kind of experienced it, but they're like, I don't want to surrender to God. Right. I think he mentions the fact that, the roommate goes, yeah, I just don't want to change my life. Yeah, you convinced me. I believe it's true. I know it's all true. But then why did you believe it? Yeah, I'm having too much fun, living my life.
Scare with the hell. That's the fact.
Yeah, scare him with hell. There you go. That'll scare him with hell.
That's the reality. They
Yeah.
believe that.
Right. So it's important that we share the truth. It's important that we defend it, that we commend it, that we persuade. It's important that we move them emotionally, but we always have to bring it down to that commitment. And it's always I remember the story when I was younger that was really helped me, was some guy stretched a high wire across Niagara Falls. And he says, how many guys believe that I can walk across this high wire? Because they've seen it, right? And he does. He walks across the Niagara Falls and back, and they all clap. He says, how many think I could push a wheelbarrow across this wire? Everyone says he could. He gets in there and he pushes the wheelbarrow back. How many think I could push a person in the wheelbarrow across? Oh, yeah, of course you could. We believe that. All right, who wants to get in the wheelbarrow? No. Yeah, you believe he can do it, but you're not willing to commit to him. Right. Do you really believe it? Well, now my life's at stake. I'm not quite sure I want to commit to that. That's where people come from Christ. Hey, do you believe there's heaven? Yeah, that's a really beautiful thing. You believe there's I don't want to go there. Do you believe that God really exists? Yeah, and he just loves you. Yeah, I believe that. What do you want to commit to him? Well, I'm not ready for that. Right. So be aware of that apologetics isn't simply rational. And we talked about, is Christianity rational? right? And some people, oh, you're just gonna try to, argue people into the kingdom of God. But I think the goal of showing that Christianity is rational is to get to the point where they have to make that commitment. Right. So they can't say, well, I don't believe that's true, right? No, I believe the truth of it. I see the truth. I've experienced it. Spirit's working into my heart. I've experienced that. I want that. Now you got to commit. You have to do all three. You have to bring that to that place of commitment. Then, so that's the goal. I think that's the goal of apologetics, is to help that process along. So especially with the mind, right? Especially with the mind. It's very, very important. So creation, he talks about creation again. Romans 1:19, we're able to see creation. We're also able to know God's divine attributes and his power and his majesty. Let's talk about seeing the big picture. He talks about some of the big questions, and that's page 23. I got my list of 10 that I'm working on. But he lists, why are we here? Does it matter what choices I make? How did I happen to be born into this family in this country? What will happen after I leave this life? Inky, why is it important to even ponder those questions?
Well, because I think, people tend to be very curious about those kind of things. And, oftentimes when they ask those questions, like, why am I here? Or why do I exist? Or what happens when I die? It's kind of like they're just curious, and, they're like, huh, it's kind of like, who created me, and like, what happens if I die? It's kind of like, you want to believe in something, so you want to have faith in something. And so most of the time when I ask those questions myself, because I'm a believer in God, I say, okay, God is the reason I'm here. God is the reason why I've been put in this family. And what happens if I die? Well, then I'll be in heaven with God.
So it forces you to deal with reality, doesn't it?
Mhm.
And you start beginning to realize that there is absolute truth behind those questions. And then you'll find the objects that are worthy of your faith. So I think it's really important that we ask those questions of ourselves constantly and start asking people those questions. That will really begin to open up, I think, spiritual conversations and force them to begin to say, yeah, well, really, what's going on? And then you can come and you can share your worldview. You can share your experiences. You can share what you know. And they start saying, wow, that makes sense. Right? That makes sense. That's rational. Right? That seems like a viable thing for me to put my trust in. So at least you're getting to the point where they're dealing with these hard questions, because why? Everyone has a hole in their heart. You got to believe that. Right? On the outside, they look happy. On the outside, they look content. Everything's great. They got money. They got fame. They have everything they want. But every single person inside has that big hole. And one of the things you want to do with apologetics is to get the junk out of the way to expose that hole. And they go, ouch. Right? And we'll talk a little bit about a cultural apologetics. And I think that's one of the things you need to be thinking about in our culture, in a postmodern culture. That might be the place to start, to get to that pain. Right? Someone who's into gender identity. And that person you gotta have to have a lot of pain to go through gender transitioning. I'm sorry, I'm not doing that. You're not messing with my masculinity, right? I'm not giving that up, right? So something's got to be going on inside their heart that they would even consider changing from a man to a woman or from a woman to man. There's a lot of pain behind that. If you can get to that pain, you can get to that hole. Now you can get to reality. You can get to the point where they're really open to talking about the important issues of life. Who is God? Who is Jesus? What has God done? And so you have to be careful then. We got to go quickly here. Moral smoke screens. Right. And the point here is that most intellectual questions are moral questions. Now, there are people out there, they do struggle, they do have stumbling blocks, how can God exist? Some people really struggle with that. How could Jesus be God and man? Yeah, okay. How can Jesus' death on the cross pay for my sins? Did Jesus really rise from the dead? Yeah, and they do have legitimate questions. But a lot of people, they're throwing those questions out there just to keep you from seeing the fact that they don't want to submit. And so you have to be able to see through that. Jesus, we talked about that in the Gospel of John, right? Jesus heals people, he does these miracles. He says, you guys are just following because you want free bread. Hello, right? Hello, and stop it. Either commit to me or get out of here, right? So he had to cut through the smoke, blow away the smoke screen and say, here's the issue. Believe in me, eat my flesh, drink my blood, commit fully to me. And they, no, that's too hard. Well, see you later. And so you have to get people to that point. And don't be afraid. Because you want to get people to the point where either they accept Christ or they reject Christ. You don't want to leave people where they're happy in their smoke screens. Right? And some people go to church, 40, 50, 60 their whole life with those smoke screens around them and never deal with that hard issue. So you have to blow the smoke away, get to that hard issue. Because otherwise John Stott said, we cannot pander to a man's intellect, intellectual arrogance, but we must cater to his intellectual integrity. So in other words, you have to answer the legitimate questions, but you don't pander to his smoke screens. Right? So you just have to say, look, the truth, it's true, believe it or don't. Right. I'm going to keep praying for you. I'm going to keep sharing this, but you know it and I know it, that the problem is not that you don't believe it's true and you just don't want to commit. And just be honest with, just be right up front with them when you get to that point. Don't play games with them. Don't play their game. Just blow the smoke away. And if they hate you, then let them hate you. Right. But I think they'll probably respect you more if you blow their smoke away. And you still love them. You still call them on it and say, look, hey, no, it's not an easy decision, but quit blowing smoke up smoke in my ear. Right. I'm not that dumb. Okay. I wasn't born yesterday. Doubt strikes terror. I like that section that is very dangerous to suppress your doubt. And a lot of churches do not let Christians ask the difficult questions because they're afraid. Oh, no, just believe it. Just shut up. Believe it. What are you, a bad Christian? And so they never really deal with the issues and they're struggling and they just kind of stuff them. And that's usually when they leave Christianity. They suppress their doubts. You need to get those doubts out in the open. Get them to express them. And that's why it's really important that you go through this class so that even other Christians, you can help them. And they're just like, man, I really know if God exists. Well, hey, let's talk about it. That's a legitimate question. Does God exist? Yeah, you better ask that question. That's a very good question. Right. Well, let's talk about it. How would you even know if he existed or not? And then you can take them through those steps. Doubt can be healthy and helpful if you help them to resolve the doubts. It can help them make big steps of growth, can help get their paradigm shifted in the right way. And so that's why many Christians fall away after faith in high school. A lot of times it's just an emotional experience and it's kind of held together by their family and by their Christian group. But once they get away, that pressure is gone and then they fall away. So don't hit the panic button. You should allow sincere questioning, should be a lifelong process. You don't have to know everything in order to have assurance and conviction. There's always going to be questions that you don't know. There's always going to be doubts. There's always going to be things that you can't explain. So don't be afraid of that. But God gives us enough information so that we can believe in him. He doesn't give us so much information that we're overwhelmed that we have to believe against our will. So he gives us enough. So if you want to believe, there's enough for you to say, yeah, I'm convinced. But he doesn't overwhelm you so that if you don't want to believe, you have that option. And he will not force you to believe. So he withholds enough information so you can do that.
Almost like Moses covered the face.
Like Moses covering his face, yeah. No, I don't know. Actually, you got to run. I just wanted to talk about two other things. Knowing that Christianity is true versus showing Christianity is true. And this is like on the last page of that document. This isn't from the book. This is from a different book. But it was really helpful for me like 40 years ago when I read this book, and not this book, but a different book. And to understand that for me to know that Christianity is true, it's more subjective, because the Spirit of God communicates with my spirit that I'm a child of God. And the fact that I'm born again is a personal, real experience. I feel the life in me. I feel the Holy Spirit within me. I experience God speaking to me and working in my heart. That's something I personally experience. I can't deny it. Okay. To know that Christianity is true mainly comes through the work of the Spirit in your life, in the transformation of life. As the Spirit works and moves, convicts you and helps you grow, helps you obey. You go, man, I'm a Christian. I believe it's true. Right? You don't need any logical arguments. You don't need that, because it's a reality. And the Holy Spirit does that to non-believers as well. The Holy Spirit comes in and convicts them. We saw in John 16, convicts them of sin, righteousness, and judgment. And so the Holy Spirit, trust the Holy Spirit to do that. You can't do it. You can talk about the intellectual, you can talk about your experiences, you can share your emotion and how God has worked with you, but the Spirit is going to come and he's going to convict them and work in their heart. You have to pray for that. You have to trust in that. And they're going to know Christianity is true before their head does. Does it make sense? They're going to know that God exists. They're going to know that Jesus is God. They're going to know Christ died for them. They're going to know they're a sinner simply because the Spirit is convicting their hearts. Their head hasn't caught up yet. And that's where apologetics comes in, showing Christianity true. It's good for us because it helps us understand our faith, right? It's, as Augustine said, it's faith seeking understanding. Faith comes first, then the understanding, right? If you're seeking to understand first, you'll never come to faith. You know, people say, I'll believe it when I see it. No, the truth is you'll see it when you believe it. When you believe it, then you see it. If you're waiting to see it, you'll never, ever believe it. But once you believe it, then you begin to understand it. And that's where apologetics becomes very, very helpful for us once we've already believed. It helps us to make a consistent worldview, helps us to put all the pieces together in a coherent, sensible way that makes understanding. So our worldview is coherent and makes sense. And it helps us then, when we share the gospel, to show that Christianity is rational. It does make sense. There are answers. They don't have to blow their brains out to become a Christian. It does make sense. So I thought there's other issues we could talk about, but I'll leave it at that. So knowing Christianity is true, work of the Holy Spirit, very, very subjective, like Phil pointed out. But showing Christianity to be true can be very, very objective. And both of those are going on at the exact same time. As you're doing the objective showing apologetics, the spirit is working on the subjective level. You need both, I think, to be effective. Any questions? Otherwise, I'm 10 minutes over and I'll let you guys go. I know you gotta get back to work, Ashley. Big day tomorrow. Do you have to prep for that? You have to
A
prep
little
for your,
bit, but it's
okay, good. All right,
Friday.
So letting zip
Good
it.
luck, Ashley.
all right,
Thank
good
you.
luck. And then
So where's
Phil,
the-
you have fun in New York?
Oh, nice.
Yes.
New York.
New York.
Good.
If you get time to go have some fun, but go in a group. It's New York's a dangerous place.
We miss Inky.
And we miss Inky, so
Uh,
come back, Inky.
Show your face and go.
And then I will see, will you be showing up on Saturday, Phil? For the men's Bible study?
Saturday. Yes, yep.
Okay,
9
Inky
o'clock.
too?
no, I won't be there on Saturday.
Okay.
I have to go to a doctor's appointment.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, I'll see you guys either Saturday, Sunday, or sometime in the future. All right, I'll see you guys.
Thank you.
Bye, thank you.